Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers. We're back with, you guessed it, another video. Today we're going to be talking about, I guess we're going to be talking about Capcom games.
So today we got another ranking video, and this one, it's going to be dedicated towards Capcom. So in case you missed it, Capcom recently invited me to their HQ in San Francisco to stream with them on their official Twitch. And that was just a career highlight and was something really special. But it got me thinking, have I played like every Capcom game from the last 10 years? What games have I not played? And after looking it up, it turns out, outside of remasters, I've actually played every single Capcom game released in the 2020s. And so for today's ranking video, we're going to be ranking every Capcom game released in the 2020s from worst to best. I'm going to be giving each one of these games a little review, stacking them up against each other, seeing which ones are worth your time, and seeing which ones are worth skipping. I'll be sharing my thoughts, feelings, memories, etc., and I got quite a lot to say about many of these games, so get the popcorn, get the spicy nuggets, start up the car, start going to bed, however you're going to watch or listen to this video, we're going to be here a minute. But I think it's going to be a fun one. Capcom really have been popping off banger after banger over the last 10 or so years, and the 2020s really highlight that. For this list though, I do have one ground rule that I want to state very clearly right here. I will not be looking at any re-releases or remasters for this list. Over the 2020s, Capcom have had some amazing remasters, collections, and general re-releases. Those will not be present for today's video, so there will be no Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. Capcom Fighting Collection 2 won't be here. The Battle Network Collection. Any of the Ace Attorney remasters, they're not going to be here. I'm looking at new games that released for the first time in the 2020s. I will, however, include the Resident Evil 3 and 4 remakes, since those are remakes from the ground up and are actually quite different from their original games. They aren't just ports or simple re-releases, they actually substantially change things up, and so they're getting included here. If you came to this video expecting to see a certain game and then it doesn't show up, it's probably because it didn't release in the 2020s. For instance, Monster Hunter World isn't on this list. Resident Evil 7 isn't on this list. Those came out in the 2010s. But I'm sure people are going to say that I still forgot a game. Let me know down below how you're feeling. In fact, let me know how you're feeling about this entire list and what your favorite Capcom games are. I would genuinely love to know. This intro's gone overboard, so please like, share, comment, subscribe. Got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Let's get to the games. What is the weakest Capcom game of the 2020s? So here we actually have two games, a double creature feature. It's Resident Evil Resistance and Resident Evil Reverse. It really shouldn't come as a surprise that these are the weakest games Capcom have put out in the 2020s and are some of the worst Resident Evil games of them all. So what even are these two games and why are they so bad? Well, they were actually both multiplayer titles, and as we've come to learn throughout the decades, Resident Evil and PvP really just do not go together. Outside of co-op, Resident Evil and multiplayer are not friends. They're not even fuck buddies. They just can't really seem to get it right. And these two games really were no exception. Resident Evil Reverse has actually been shut down entirely, so there's no way to even play this game, and while Resistance is still accessible, good luck finding any matches. There's nothing really here, which is why they're pretty much at the bottom of the barrel. But what even were these games? Well, Resident Evil Resistance was an asymmetrical multiplayer title in the vein of Dead by Daylight, which actually seems like a really good idea for Resident Evil, but it just didn't really catch on. And then Resident Evil Reverse went over about as well as a wet fart. I remember that this one was delayed for quite a while, but when it finally did come out, it was pretty much panned immediately due to a lack of content, aggressive, like really aggressive microtransactions, the worst of any Capcom game, and just not being very fun. And so while it's lame that both of these have been shut down and you can't access them anymore, I don't think we're really missing anything here. But you know what? I can still say that these aren't the worst Resident Evil games ever made. I would rather just look at the menu and the screen telling me that the games are offline and it can't connect to the server rather than playing Umbrella Corps. But as things stand, there's really not much here now. And so here we have Mega Man X Dive Offline, which released in 2023. Now initially, Mega Man X Dive was actually a mobile title, and I don't usually cover mobile titles, but it did get an offline version for Steam, and that's what we're looking at today. So what even is this game? You're telling me that Mega Man got a new game in the 2020s and it's a Mega Man X game? Well, hold your horses right there. Like I said 15 seconds ago, this was initially a mobile game, and while I think it is pretty cool of Capcom to actually port it to PC in an offline capacity so the game is preserved in some way, it still very much plays and feels like a mobile game at heart, just without all of the microtransactions, many different currencies, and multiplayer elements. Yeah, it has offline in the title, so as you could guess, there are no multiplayer elements here. You can just play through the story mode. And speaking of this game's story, it's pretty much just Mega Man fan fiction at this point. It really is just an excuse for all of the Mega Mans to come together, and when I mean all of them, I genuinely mean all of them. Not just X, not just the classic, even ZX, Battle Network, and Legends show up here as well. And you know, when it comes to Mega Man fan service, this might be the best game of them all. I've never seen a game reference every single Mega Man series, and all this fan service alone makes this game worth trying if you're a huge Mega Man fan. Unfortunately, when it comes to the gameplay, yeah, this is where the game kind of struggles a bit. So it is a Mega Man X game, and naturally it plays pretty similar to other Mega Man X games. He has a decent moveset, and most of the levels are built with this in mind. There's even a bunch of older levels that return here, so there might be some very familiar level design, and while the game feels nice enough on a gamepad, I would say that it feels nowhere near as good as any of the Mega Man X games that I've personally played, which isn't that many, but what I'm trying to say here is it didn't feel great. Like, it just didn't feel as smooth as I'd like. It didn't feel like I had total control over X, and it just felt a bit imprecise, and I imagine it's because it was initially a mobile game with touch controls. But anyway, the game sees you going through a huge number of levels, taking out basically everything that moves, fighting bosses. There's a bunch of throwbacks to other Mega Man games. You'll be jumping over bottomless pits, and it very much feels like a Mega Man game. One thing I was surprised by was just how much content is in this game actually. Yeah, it was a mobile title that was updated for years and years, but there is a metric shit ton of levels in this game. You could be here for hundreds, if not dozens of hours. Like, it is unreal just how many levels are in this game. It feels almost endless at times, and then there's this mission mode, there's even more levels there, and it's like, holy crap, you could be here for potentially hundreds of hours. So you might be wondering, why is this game ranked so low then if it has so much content? Well, it's not all that enjoyable. I don't find the moment-to-moment gameplay to be anywhere near as exciting, engaging, fun, or challenging as really any other Mega Man game I've played. It just felt kinda dull in comparison. I didn't think the new levels were anything special, and going through the older levels, I mean, that was cool and all, but it kinda just made me want to play the older games where it was way better. Yeah, having all these other Mega Mans and all this fan service is really cool as well, but when you don't find the core moment-to-moment gameplay to be all that enjoyable, yeah, it kinda hurts things. I also found the game to be pretty grindy. I found myself having to go back to other levels just so I could be a high enough level to actually take things out. And I'm not talking about no Olive Garden date, I'm talking about just destroying enemies. If you're not a certain level, you just won't do like any damage to them at all. It becomes virtually impossible to beat enemies. And I've heard that this grind is a lot better in the offline version than the original mobile game version, so I can't even imagine how bad it was in the original game. But it's also like, this game is already gargantuan, and you want me to grind levels on top of that? Yeah, I think I'm okay. I didn't put a ton of time into this game, and so maybe it gets way better or the gameplay loops become way more compelling, but I just wasn't really enjoying what I was playing all that much here. The game looks fine enough, it's got a bunch of great music to it. I mean, it's clear they love Mega Man. There's so much fan service here and love for the brand. I just wish it wasn't originally a mobile game, because you can very much feel that it's a mobile game in its DNA. It doesn't matter that it's been put offline, that it's on Steam, and that there's no microtransactions. It's just kind of baked into the game's design. There is still some enjoyment to be had here, just not as much as I had hoped. If you absolutely love Mega Man to death, then yeah, you should check this one out. Everybody else though, yeah, we're gonna keep waiting for the next real Mega Man game. And so here we have Exoprimal, which initially released in 2023. This might be like the strangest Capcom release of the last 10 years. The game isn't bad, but it's just weird. Obviously, like everyone else, when I first initially saw this game, I went, dinosaurs, Capcom, Dino Crisis is finally back, hell yeah, but no, this has absolutely nothing to do with Dino Crisis. It is nothing like Dino Crisis. It is actually a multiplayer-focused third-person shooter where the primary game mode is PvPvE, but there are some other game modes where it's just PvE. And while the game was never originally pitched as a live service title, it very much was live service in nature, complete with seasons and constant updates, but after just 1 year support ended for the title. But they haven't cancelled or shut the game down or anything like that, at least not currently. You still very much can play this game, find matches, and actually still have some fun with it. I put a decent amount of time into Exoprimal, and while I'm mixed on plenty of things, I absolutely could see the potential with this one, and it's a shame that it didn't really take off like how Capcom wanted. Now, something that's always been pretty strange about Exoprimal is that it actually has a fully fledged story to it, complete with an actual plotline, characters, character arcs, lore, and genuine progression. And I say that this is strange because, again, this is basically a live service multiplayer game. Usually those don't have any kind of story, but here there's hours upon hours of cutscenes. There's upwards of like 10 hours of cutscenes in this game, and you unlock these cutscenes as you continue to do multiplayer matches and level up. It's one of your rewards along with all the new gear and unlocks you get when you level up. But how is the story itself? I mean, it seems fine enough. I never saw all of it. I didn't even see half of it since it really is a grind to get all of these cutscenes. But they were decently well produced, and it feels like Capcom actually went out of their way to try to explain what the hell is happening here. The dialogue wasn't terrible either. I wish I had more to say about this, but I just didn't see a whole lot of the cutscenes since, again, you have to unlock them and it can take quite a while to unlock these. So when it comes to the actual gameplay of Exoprimal, this is where it's always been a bit funky. So Exoprimal actually features a number of different game modes to it, but unlike most multiplayer games, you actually don't start with all of the game modes. You need to progress the story in order to unlock the other game modes. When you start the game, you only have one game mode, Dino Survival. This is the main game mode of Exoprimal and what most people play. So this is where it's PvPvE. So what does that actually mean? Well, it's 2 teams of 5 players fighting as many enemies as possible, and they're trying to defeat all of the dinosaurs faster than the other team. It's essentially a race. Who can defeat all of the dinos faster? There are 3 different classes to choose from: assault, tank, and support, but each of them feature a bunch of different Exoprimal suits, leading to some varied gameplay. These are essentially your heroes, complete with their own strengths, weaknesses, ultimates, etc., and most of them actually do play relatively different. And of course, as you complete matches, gain experience, and level up, you'll unlock more exosuits, different gear, etc., leading to even more variety and options. When it comes to the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, as strange as it sounds, it actually is quite fun. Mowing down as many dinosaurs as possible is almost always a good time. You just get absolutely swarmed sometimes, and sometimes it can actually get pretty intense. Usually both teams are pretty close to each other when it comes to completing objectives, and it usually comes down to the wire as to who's going to win the match, but I've had my fair share of squashes as well where it wasn't even close. But again, the core gameplay is surprisingly fun here. Despite how mindless it is, I did find a certain level of enjoyment and entertainment here. I won't lie to you all though, it does start to get pretty repetitive fast, and that really leads to my biggest issue with Exoprimal is the overall progression and just how stale everything gets. Like I mentioned, you have to unlock the other game modes, you have to unlock the other Exo fighters, and honestly, it just takes way too long to unlock these. You'll just be grinding for hours and hours and hours, doing the same game mode on pretty much the same map with the same Exo fighters, slowly unlocking the other ones, eventually getting the other game modes, and it just takes way too long. And the other game modes are arguably more exciting than Dino Survival. Some of them are PvE, some of them have bosses, some of them just have hundreds of dinosaurs raining from the sky, no exaggeration, like it gets absolutely crazy. Some of Exoprimal's very best moments are here in the other game modes, and I'm sure that 90% of the players didn't see these because they didn't grind for hours on end to unlock them, and I shouldn't have to do that. And yes, I know that the other gameplay modes are tied to the story or whatever, but I'm sorry, this is just ridiculous. This is just a baffling decision. How many multiplayer games lock its other game modes and maps behind progression? Like, you don't lock certain things behind progression because you want people to, stick with the experience and have some variety. Locking off the core modes of the game is just ridiculous. Locking off other characters, exo fighters, skins, weapons, gear, etc., that makes sense, but game modes and maps, yeah, I don't get that one, and it really holds this entire game back. The progression just kind of ruins the entire experience, low-key. Like, at the end of the day, this is a multiplayer focused title. If people aren't sticking with the game, it's going to die off, you won't be able to find matches, and it'll eventually get shut down. And I'm certain that Exoprimal, unfortunately, will be shut down in the future. It doesn't matter that the game actually looks pretty good, that the presentation is nice, the production values are there, or that the gunplay is nice, that the moment-to-moment gameplay is actually entertaining. This game, it can have tons of great things about it, but if nobody is playing it, it doesn't matter. And I don't think a lot of people are playing it because The progression was just way too sluggish, and it took too long to unlock things that frankly shouldn't have needed to be unlocked in the first place. And then of course this game had everyone's favorite, microtransactions, lots of microtransactions, but again, it doesn't really matter. Exoprimal, I feel like it's one of those what could have been stories, and I feel like in a few years we're going to look back on this game and go, wow, remember that weird dinosaur game Capcom made in the 2020s that totally died off? Yeah, I don't remember it either. And so with that, I, in good conscience, can't recommend the game. I don't think it has much life left in it. It's about as alive as the dinosaurs at this point. And so here we have Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, initially releasing in 2021. So this was actually the first new Ghosts and Goblins game in a very long time. It was celebrating the series' 35th anniversary. So as the title implies, it very much is a Ghosts and Goblins game. It's all about our knight Arthur, who's battling all these creatures in the demon realm to try to save the princess. The plot is as shrimple as it gets, and that's fine with me. And when it comes to the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, yeah, it's pretty similar to the old Ghosts and Goblins games. First off, it does feel a hell of a lot better than those old games. It is nowhere near as rigid, stiff, or just clunky as some of the original titles in this series. Like, people forget just how horrible the NES game feels nowadays. Thankfully, Resurrection, it does feel nice, it controls well, and it felt like I had a good sense of control over Arthur and his movements. When it comes to what Arthur can do in this game, it's pretty much the same as the older games. There's plenty of weapons to pick up and use here, each with their own pros and cons, some of them certainly having more cons than others. Arthur can double jump, and like the old games, his armor just absolutely falls apart if he gets hit by something, at least depending on your difficulty level. Something cool about this game is it does actually have some form of an upgrade system. You'll collect these umbral bees that will upgrade Arthur's magic and combat skills, allowing you to really fuck shit up in this game. Like, you get some really good power-ups and abilities here that makes the game significantly easier than it was before, and you're gonna absolutely need it, because like the old Ghosts and Goblins games, this is not an easy game whatsoever. This is arguably the hardest game Capcom has made in the 2020s. This is that old school kind of difficult. The levels are very challenging, there's a lot of trial and error here, and enemy placement, frankly, is just kind of bullshit. It feels like enemies are just spawning all over the place, and sometimes it's in the worst imaginable areas, really just leading to some really sticky, tricky, and icky situations. You like them bars? I'll be here all week. What I'm trying to say is, this game is no walk in the park, not in the slightest. Even with all of these upgrades, even with all these different difficulty modes, the game is still going to wipe the floor with you plenty of times, and like the original, you are expected to beat the game twice. The bosses are no joke, the levels are no joke, Arthur's armor certainly is a joke, and my patience was starting to be a joke by the end of it, but I was also playing on like the normal difficulty. If you play on the easier one, the game does become legitimately easier, but if that wasn't enough, there's actually a co-op mode somebody can come and join you in. That's nice. You know what I've always thought isn't all that nice though? This game's presentation. I know that this has been a point of contention for a while, especially with the diehard Ghosts and Goblins community, but I'll be real, I just don't really care for this game's aesthetic. It looks kinda cheap, it kinda reminds me of a mobile or flash game, and it just doesn't click with me. I just don't find it all that appealing. I feel like it's one of those rare games where I actually don't really care for the aesthetic. What would I have liked to have seen? I actually would have liked to have seen some kind of retro throwback, maybe to like the Super Nintendo. Like, what we got here isn't awful, I just don't really care for it. I will say the music is pretty good in this game though. There's a bunch of classic tracks remastered here, like it's what you would expect from a Ghosts and Goblins game. It doesn't reinvent the G and G wheel whatsoever, and while it does have a few little innovations to it, this is more of a throwback to the series rather than the next big step forward. But I'm just glad that the series came back at all. This is a very old, somewhat forgotten franchise that honestly deserves a bit more love. This series has been underrated for pretty much its entire existence, and so I'm glad that we got at least one modern game. If you're a fan of the originals or you're looking for a decent 2D platformer, I think you should check this one out. Just be aware that yeah, it is pretty challenging. And so here we have Monster Hunter Stories 2, initially releasing in 2021. So this game is a follow-up to Monster Hunter Stories, the narrative-driven turn-based JRPG. And I gotta say, while it is incredibly similar to the first game, it does make a few improvements to make this overall a better experience than the original. Now when it comes to the actual story itself, it is a little different from the first game. with your character being a descendant of the legendary rider known as Red, who gets entrusted with this mysterious Rathalos that'll apparently bring the end of the world or something along those lines. But this Ratha was entrusted to you essentially by your late father, but it's up to you to protect it. And a lot of people are going to want this Ratha, including monster hunters. And all I will say is that there is a bit more to this story than meets the eye. I found the story to be a lot more captivating than the first games. It's intriguing, it's interesting, it makes the most of the world of Monster Hunter. And I feel like it actually tries to do something a little different. There's also some somewhat likable characters in this game, which is always a good thing. Now when it comes to the gameplay, it is extremely similar to the first Monster Hunter stories. It just feels like it's on a little bit of a grander scale. Not that much of a grander scale, but it's certainly got a larger scope. This is actually a very lengthy, massive JRPG that will take you well beyond the 40-hour mark, especially if you want to do any of the side quests or try to get as many monsters as you can. It'll take you easily past 50 hours. But when it comes to the actual core gameplay, yes, it is super similar to the originals, where you're exploring around these somewhat open areas or going through these very linear dungeons. Usually you're looking for someone, something, you're trying to defeat a monster, or you're trying to get an egg. I'd say really all of the objectives fall under one of those categories, but what keeps things interesting is the monsties. There's more monsters in this game than the prior, but each one has quite a bit more depth than the original game. They feel more individualized, characterized, and I'd say that genuinely all of them feel a little different from each other. The way you get them though is exactly the same, where you gotta go steal the egg and then you get to hatch the egg. And of course this feeds your inner completionist, where you want to try to get as many monsties as possible, and yeah, there's a good amount to get in this game. And then when it comes to the actual battles, it is extremely similar to the first game. If you've played the first game whatsoever, you'll exactly know how this plays. It still has the rock, paper, scissors structure with power, speed, and technical. You can eventually get on your monster and do some really powerful moves. There's special moves, there's actually different weapons you can choose from, and it feels like there's just a little bit more variety with this battle system than the prior game. You can target different body parts, which can get you items and stun monsters, you know, just like the main games. And of course, when you defeat a monster, you'll get a bunch of crafting materials allowing you to form better and better armor. It actually is pretty similar to the main series in that sense. It's just turn-based battles. And while the battles aren't these just massive spectacles, I still think the combat is good in this game. It's certainly not the most deep JRPG turn-based battle system, but it is quite fast, especially if you speed it up, and I think the changes they made further give this combat its own identity. Is it going to be winning any awards for best combat in a JRPG? Absolutely not, but I still found it to be mostly enjoyable. I also found the presentation to be rather enjoyable. I played this on PC where it ran just fine, but I like the art style. I like how it looks. It goes for something very different from the main series, and it's clear this was done because it was primarily made for the Switch, but I'm digging it. Not every game needs to look hyper realistic. If it's got a nice art style, it's got a nice art style and aesthetic, and I think this game absolutely does. So while I think this game is better than Stories 1, I still do have a few issues with it. The exploration in this game might be okay, but the actual level design, specifically the dungeon design, is just really bland. It's very similar to the first games, where it feels like it's just kind of thrown together, and at times it feels almost randomly generated. It's just a bunch of linear hallways that you'll go through with the occasional small open area, and you know, that is pretty similar to the main series level design, but that works because the location and the level design really are just a backdrop for these giant fights. Here, that's not really the case. And you'll also find yourself frequently going back to the same areas over and over, going through this really just simple, basic level design, and it's like, could we get a little more variety here? Could we get something a bit more interesting? Maybe some basic puzzles, maybe some platforming, maybe some areas that really utilize the monsters' abilities. I mean, those show up from time to time, but they feel relatively underutilized. The level design, I feel like it needed a lot more oomph than what we ended up getting. The first Stories was a 3DS game. I wasn't expecting exceptional level design or intricately designed dungeons. This is not a 3DS game. Why is the level design just as basic as the prior game? And all of this can make the game feel rather repetitive at times. Even though I like the combat did start to get old, especially because this game is so long. Like, this is a game that you will be playing for weeks, if not months. It's as long as the main games, and at times I really wonder if this game just has the legs for that kind of longevity. Regardless of that, I could still say that the game is pretty good. It's not great, and I totally do have my issues, but if you like Monster Hunter, then I think this is worth checking out. If you like turn-based JRPGs, or maybe you're looking for another monster-catching JRPG that isn't Pokemon or Digimon, this one might be worth checking out. And so here we have the Resident Evil 3 remake, releasing initially in 2020. Now, I know over the years that this game has gotten a bit of a bad rap, but I still do think that it is a good game, even if I do prefer the original. Yeah, it's not the best remake, it's not the most faithful, and it does have a number of issues, but I still found the game to be mostly enjoyable. I remember being pretty excited to see that Resident Evil 3 was getting remade, and I still am glad that this remake exists so that there is a more modern alternative for people, but this certainly isn't a replacement of that original game. When it comes to the story, it is pretty much identical to the original game though. The game really is all about Jill Valentine just trying to get the hell out of Raccoon City any way that she possibly can, but of course the Nemesis is here to stop her. Obviously there are a few other characters that get involved here, but this is one of the more basic stories in the Resident Evil series, and I still think it's pretty good all these years later. I think Jill is still a really likable protagonist you're rooting for the entire time. You want to see her escape the city, and Nemesis, she's one of the most badass women of any video game, and I think the remake does a really good job at portraying her. I will say, when it comes to the other characters and really the story in general, the pacing just feels kinda off in this game. I feel like everything's just kind of rushed. I feel like events and moments aren't really given time to breathe, and it just kind of moves on from one scene to the next a little too quickly. I think the best example I can give is with Nemesis himself. You know, he shows up, he's this hulking monstrosity, he scares the shit out of Jill, and he stalks you for a little bit. And obviously he's in his first form here, but I feel like there just isn't enough time that he's in his first initial form, you know, the really iconic design. Very quickly he moves to his second form, and everything just moves a little too fast for my liking, and this is an issue that carries over to the actual game itself, but it's very noticeable with the story, and I feel like things could have been fleshed out just a little bit more. And I'm not just saying this because this is a remake and the original game fleshed things out more, but even if you look at this game individually and don't compare it to the remake, it still feels a bit rushed. Overall, I think the story and characters and all of that is fine, but it's not great, and there's certainly been a lot better in this series. But you know what is great? This game's presentation. All these years later, this is still a fantastic looking video game. The character models look exceptional, the environments are really well detailed, the lighting is on point, and the game actually ran pretty well. When it comes to like the voice acting and the music, I also think it was pretty decent here as well. It's certainly better than what the original had, that's for sure. Okay, maybe not the save theme, but the rest of it, oh, absolutely. So when it comes to the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, it is very similar to the Resident Evil 2 remake, but that really shouldn't surprise anybody since the original Resident Evil 3 was very similar to the original Resident Evil 2. The game is a very linear survival horror third-person shooter with a heavy emphasis on action. While there are some horror elements here and there, and the game certainly got a jump or two out of me, I would say that this is the least scary of all the modern Resident Evil games. It really hones in and focuses on the action here. The game is a lot faster paced, and it really just kind of throws you into the thick of things, as opposed to Resident Evil 1 and 2 where they really slowly built things up. Here, no, Nemesis shows up within the first 30 minutes of the game, and he can absolutely stomp a mud hole in you, especially if you're not careful. Thankfully, when it comes to the combat, it is very similar to RE2, and it feels nice. The guns feel satisfying, they got a good kick to them, and enemies respond accordingly. You actually get a pretty good arsenal in this game as well. Like, you get a grenade launcher at one point, and this thing just fucks shit up. Despite that though, you still will be managing your ammo and other resources. The game doesn't give you just an absolute shit ton of stuff here. No, you still have to be a little conservative. You'll also be going through these rather linear areas actually. This game is surprisingly linear. You never really do much backtracking, and that sense of exploration that the RE2 remake had is just not here. It's pretty straightforward, and it's usually just point A to B. Along the way you will solve some puzzles, but these puzzles are not complex whatsoever. They're actually pretty basic and feel watered down even when compared to the original, but you won't exactly find me complaining about that. Something that you'll find me complaining about is that at times this game just kind of feels like an asset flip of RE2. I mean, granted, the original game low-key felt like that in certain areas, but it's a lot more obvious in a big AAA game like this. For instance, you go back to the police station from RE2, and there's just a lot of reused assets, environments, and elements from the RE2 remake. And at times it can be a bit distracting, at least in my opinion. Something I did enjoy was this game's set pieces. There are a fair amount of them, and most of the set pieces involve Nemesis, and yeah, these are scripted unlike the original, but at least they did a good job at making some spectacles here, and they give Nemesis plenty of great moments. Like, he does feel like the monstrosity from the original game. But I will put it out there that in terms of gameplay, Mr. X is definitely more threatening than Nemesis, which is probably not how it's supposed to be, but at least they didn't totally fuck up Nemesis. Something they totally fucked up was the clock tower section. by just not including it. Yeah, they just completely omitted an area from the original game. It's not here and there's really nothing to replace it, and maybe that's why the game feels a bit shorter, or why the story feels a bit more rushed. Instead we get a boss fight, and yeah, it's a cool boss fight, but I think it all goes just a bit too fast. I feel like this game in general just goes by too fast. It feels like it blows its load way too early. There's not enough of Nemesis, especially in his human form, and I'd say that the first half of the game is better than the second half. I've alluded to it a few times, but this is easily the shortest of the mainline Resident Evil games, taking around 4.5 to 5 hours, and it's nowhere near as replayable as any of the other ones, especially the original, since there's no choices to be made, and this further contributes to the whole rushed factor. At the end of the day, I would still recommend Resident Evil 3, especially if you like this series or survival horror games, but it's not going to blow you away by any means. I think the game is just alright. And so here we have Dragon's Dogma 2, releasing initially in 2024. I'm just kind of surprised we actually got a sequel to Dragon's Dogma. That game is like the definition of a cult hit, but hey, we got a second one. When it comes to this game's story, it isn't all that different from the original. It sees you playing as the Arisen, the chosen one that can summon and command pawns, and is the only one that could slay this dragon. They're also set to become king over the entire kingdom. So yeah, seems pretty sweet and like you have your entire life figured out for you, except you don't. There's actually a false Arisen ruling over the entire kingdom, and so it's up to you to do something about it, and that's all I'm really going to say for the story. I think the story in Dragon's Dogma 2 is, well, I'll just be honest, unfortunately I don't think it's very good. While I think it starts out interesting enough, I just had a really hard time getting invested in this game's story or characters. I also thought the storytelling was just really bland overall, and honestly, even with the unique element of the pawns, I found the story to just be really generic in this game. And sure, things pick up and get more interesting by the end of it, but I just had a hard time feeling anything when it came to this game's story, world, characters, etc., which is not a good thing to say about a big open world RPG. While it wasn't terrible, I just found it rather uninteresting. At least when it comes to the gameplay, things do fare quite a bit better. So like the first Dragon's Dogma, it is an open world RPG where you can freely explore pretty much wherever you want. Like most RPGs, when you start the game you get to actually choose from a class, but unlike most RPGs, you actually get to change your class whenever you want, and you can mix and match abilities. It is also worth noting that the game calls classes vocations, but trust me, this is classes in its purest sense. And as you get further in the game very much starts incentivizing you to mix and match these classes. They really want you to experiment, create some cool hybrids, or maybe even some super class, and I think this is actually pretty cool and still unique. I really think what makes this even more unique is just how wildly different the classes are from each other. For instance, the magic class is so different from the melee classes. How you play, how you interact in combat is completely different. So when you start mixing things up, yeah, it does get a lot more interesting. It does take a bit of time to get to that point, but every individual class still has a fair amount of depth and abilities. I will say the melee combat feels really good in this game though, like it's satisfying, there's a heavy impact, and I think the game's physics are very well done. Like when you hit somebody with a big ass move, they go flying and it feels satisfying. I think the combat is actually pretty good in Dragon's Dogma 2. Again, there's plenty of satisfying elements, there's a lot of variety thanks to the vocations, and there's some really cool elements thrown in there, like when you fight an enemy that's way bigger than you can actually climb them, Shadow of the Colossus style. But what exactly will you be fighting in this game? Well, there's a few different types of enemies. You'll be fighting these shitty little goblins you can wipe the floor with, you'll be fighting other humans, and sometimes you fight these giant creatures that can absolutely stomp your shit in. But I would say for the most part that the fights are all pretty engaging, and at times the game can actually be even a bit challenging. Thankfully, you're not going to be alone here. Let's talk about the biggest thing Dragon's Dogma 2 has, the pawns. The pawns were one of the biggest things in the original, and they're huge here. The pawns are essentially NPCs that follow you around and help you any way that they can. When you start the game, you get to create your own pawn that helps out the Arisen, but you can also summon pawns from online that will come and help you as well. You can even send your pawn online to go help somebody else. I think it's pretty cool, and probably one of the most unique aspects of this entire game. What's even cooler is that the pawns actually have some knowledge. For instance, if they were helping a player who was in a certain area and they found a secret chest. When you end up in that area, and if you have the same pawn of course, that pawn will actually tell you, hey, there's a secret chest around here, follow me to go get it. And it leads to some really cool knowledge sharing that I haven't really seen in like any other video game. The pawns are not only your party members, but who you spend the most amount of time with, and the game encourages you to constantly be swapping them out, which is what I tried to do. When it comes to the world of this game, it is quite different from most RPGs. The game does not really hold your hand whatsoever, and it can actually feel rather old school. You're not really given objective markers here, you're told a general area and you just go and investigate. You'll have to solve puzzles, you'll have to actually do a little bit of critical thinking, and you can't just teleport all over the map like you can in say Skyrim. You actually have to take these little carts whenever you find them, that is, and fast travel is relatively rare throughout the entire experience, unless you want to cough up some money for some crystals. Something you have to worry about in Dragon's Dogma 2 is your max health. When you take damage in this game, not only does your health naturally go down, but your overall max health also decreases. And the only way you can get this back is by camping or going to an inn. And so there is a little bit of resource management here. You want to make camps, you want to also make sure you're not over encumbered, and you want to make sure that your party is getting the proper care that they deserve. And I think this is pretty cool. It adds a neat dynamic that again just isn't all that common in open world RPGs. I will say, when it comes to the quests though, unfortunately they're not the most exciting. Usually it's just go get something and bring it back, or go kill a few enemies and come back. And while there are a few missions that put a unique twist on things, most of these quests feel relatively similar, and it does start to get a bit stale by the second half of the game. This is a pretty big game. The map is much larger than the first games, and there really is a lot to see here, and you'll spend a lot of time just running around in it thanks to the lack of fast travel. But you'll also become very intimate with this game's map. You'll know all of the paths, you'll know the shortcuts, you'll know where you're supposed to go, and eventually you'll really come to master it, which is something I can't say about most open world RPGs. On top of this, the game does have a day-night cycle, and during the night the enemies are way stronger. You'll really want to be avoiding night as much as possible, but sometimes it just can't be helped. And all of this does help Dragon's Dogma give it a unique feel, and it absolutely needs that, because at times, I won't lie, the open world does feel a bit generic, and sometimes your objectives really just aren't the most exciting. This is another one of those games where I think it actually peaks early. It kind of blows its load early. In the first 5 to 10 hours, it's easily the most exciting part of the game. The story's actually interesting, you're understanding how all of the vocations work, the combat is fun, you're still understanding the open world, there's a bunch of emergent events, and it can feel really exciting. But then you realize after the first 5 to 10 hours that that's really all the game has. It doesn't really introduce all that much new, and the second half of the game honestly feels like a slog. It feels like the momentum just comes down to a screeching halt, and I found myself just being very disinterested in the game as a whole, not just the story, to the point where I had trouble finishing it, and I just wish the pacing was a little better overall and it introduced some more new elements in the second half. It certainly didn't help things that when the game launched it ran like absolute dog shit. Like, this game ran just horribly, even on PS5. Nowadays it does run better, and it actually looks pretty decent as well. But on PC, man, you might just be up shit creek with this one. Overall, I think Dragon's Dogma 2 is a good game, but not a great one. While it does plenty of unique things, and tries a few things that I haven't really seen before, it does fall short in a few key areas. I would still recommend the game, especially if you like open world RPGs or if you're looking for something different, but I'm not going to be screaming to the high heavens about this one. And after playing this, you're not going to see me clamoring to see another Dragon's Dogma either. At the end of the day, this game is very similar to the first one, and I feel like it has the same shortcomings of the first game as well. It just looks a lot better now, but it still is a good one. And so here we have Kunitsigami Path of the Goddess, which initially released in 2024. This is one of the most underrated titles Capcom have ever put out, and it's actually pretty good, way better than you might expect. But it's also not the easiest game to describe. But let me try anyway. When it comes to this game's story and premise, there really isn't a lot here. It sees you playing as So, this warrior who is tasked with protecting this divine maiden named Yoshiro, who has to purge and cleanse villages of defilement, basically demons and evil, after this entire mountain gets covered in defilement. And that's really the entire story. You're just kind of purging the evil, and you know, Not every game needs to have a complex story. I think it gets the job done, and it's got a unique premise and setting. It very much is inspired by Japanese folklore, and I won't lie, it gives off some Okami vibes, but I like the game's aesthetic, premise, and unique vibes. I can say when it comes to this game's presentation, at the very least, it is pretty good. I think the game has an excellent aesthetic to it. It certainly doesn't look like a big budget AAA game, it looks more AA, but at least it hones in on an art style, and the game actually did run pretty well no matter how many units were on screen. Speaking of, let's talk about the gameplay. So this is where things get a bit more interesting, and it's a bit harder to explain, so let me try to break it down. The game is essentially an action strategy game. Now once you've picked your nose, scratched your ass, and started the game up, it'll drop you onto this world map, and here you'll choose the next level. It's very similar to say Mario with 1, 1, 1, 2, etc., and a majority of the levels are as follows. It's all about getting the Shrine Maiden from point A to B. You need to get her to the end of the map in order to purge all of the defilement. That is the main objective here, along with keeping her alive. See, she'll be moving to the gate during the daytime, but eventually it's going to become nighttime, like in real life, I'm afraid. And once it's nighttime, a bunch of demons and monsters show up that are going to try to kill her, and so it's up to you to protect her. Now, So himself is pretty great with a sword. He knows how to handle this thing, he has some really cool moves, some big slashing attacks, and he can absolutely kick some ass, but he can't take on all of these enemies at once, and so you'll be enlisting the help of other villagers, and you'll be able to assign them a number of roles to help you out. You can have some of them shooting arrows from far away, you can have some of them running up close and personal, or you can assign them nothing, where they just say bad words at the monsters and go get killed. The choice is ultimately yours, but you're going to have to make the best of these villagers and your abilities if you want to defend Yoshiro. And that's because the game can actually get decently challenging. They'll start throwing a bunch of mini bosses at you at once, and they can seriously kick your shit in, and not just your shit, but the villagers' shit as well. And there were a few moments where I was just kind of taken aback, where I was like, oh wow, that thing just really slammed through my entire defenses, and now I'm just up shit creek. And yeah, that's what being part of a strategy game is. But you know what? I actually welcome this challenge. I enjoy the challenge. I think it actually adds some stakes to these levels. It keeps things interesting, and it ultimately keeps things engaging. And it's a good thing it does, because this is actually a pretty long game, especially for the kind of game it is. It's no 30-40 hour adventure, but it'll take you well beyond the 15-hour mark if you want to go all the way through this game, which is much bigger than I expected it to be. I thought it would be, 5, 6, maybe 7 hours. No, it is twice that easy. But you know what? It actually really does come together here. Preparing during the day and then fighting off the demons at night creates some really compelling gameplay loops. They keep things interesting, and there's a bunch of little gimmicks that show up throughout the levels. There are actually levels where you're not just moving Yoshiro from point A to B, you actually have to defend her against a bunch of enemies or a boss, and this mixes things up even further. And all of this comes together to create truly one of the most underrated experiences I've had of the 2020s. Like, the game is way better than you would expect. It's actually compelling, and most importantly, it's just fun. And what's great is, if you want even more of the game, they added a survival mode a year later, and this is pretty engaging too. The game is widely available on all consoles. It's got some really nice music, I'll just throw that in there. And I have no problem recommending it. If you like action games or strategy games, or you've ever wanted to try a strategy game, this might be the one to try. It is absolutely out of Capcom's wheelhouse. Usually they do not put anything out like this, but you know what? I'm all for it. I love that they tried something different, and I can really appreciate it. The game's not terribly expensive, and I think it's actually worth your time. I wish I had more to say about it, but it's just a good game. And so here we have Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, which released in 2024. Even though I said no remasters, I'm making an exception for this one. So even though they're calling this game a deluxe remaster, I have no problem saying that this is basically a remake of the original Dead Rising. Sure, it's not on the level of a remake like Final Fantasy VII or Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, but it basically is a remake of that original game. And call it recency bias, but out of all the Dead Rising games, I think this really is the best one. It captures all the best elements from the original game, touches it up for the modern day, makes it a hell of a lot more playable than that original game, and fixes some of that game's serious issues to create just overall the best experience. Sure, you don't go absolutely freaking nuts with the weapons and combo weapons like you do in Dead Rising 3. You're not mowing down just waves and waves of zombies endlessly, but you don't need to do that to have a lot of fun. I think this game makes up for it in more than enough ways. When it comes to the game's setup, story, premise, all that, it is the same as the original Dead Rising. The script is nearly identical. A few things have been changed here and there. I know some people don't like some of the changes, but it's pretty much the exact same story. The voice acting is also different from the original. While I kind of prefer the voice acting of the original more, I still think it is very good voice acting here. The story, the world, the setting, all of that, it is just as good as it's always been. This game really still has just a phenomenal atmosphere that none of the other games have been able to replicate. It really is astounding. I love this mall, I love the vibe, the setting, it's all perfectly been recreated and it looks way better. Obviously, we should have talked about the graphics first. This is a good looking game. Sure, it doesn't look as good as some other modern Capcom games like say Dragon's Dogma 2, but I still think it is a relatively good looking game. The frame rate was very solid throughout, except when I opened up OBS, sometimes it would start stuttering like crazy, which is why my footage might be stuttering, but generally it was pretty good when it came to the presentation. Something funny is that they left all of the original animations in, and now with the game looking quite a bit better, yeah, these animations are hilarious. They're ultra janky and look super silly. It really plays into the whole horror B-movie theme that Dead Rising 1 always had, where yeah, it is serious, but there's plenty of weird, goofy, silly stuff, and it's one of the reasons why the original game, really this whole series, was as beloved as it is. Something else that is worth bringing up when it comes to the presentation is the music is completely unaltered. Even the licensed songs are in here. The soundtrack is still just phenomenal. It still just gives off the best of vibes, and I really do love the soundtrack. But let's actually talk about playing, the video game at this point. We're a few minutes in. When it comes to the gameplay, it is Dead Rising 1's gameplay, but so much better. They've really refined and improved just about everything. When it comes to the feel and controls, not only is the control scheme better, but this game just feels a hell of a lot better to play. It feels just as good, if not better, than Dead Rising 3 and 4. It's easy to pick up and play and understand, but of course, as you play more and more of it, you get better and better. This game still retains the same power structure of the original game. When you start the game, Frank sucks. He can't do jack shit. He's kind of clunky. He's super weak, has like no health, and you can barely even hold on to any weapons. But as you play through the game, you move faster. He becomes less clunky. He's stronger. You can hold more stuff. You get a bunch of cool moves to use that allow you to really fuck up the zombies. Yeah, Frank becomes awesome. You can take pictures just like the original game. You get way more PP than you did in the original, at least it feels like that, and taking pictures, it's just as much fun in this game as it was in the original. And it's all under a pretty strict time limit. The entire game still runs on the internal clock, and you really do only have 72 hours. And yeah, I like that they didn't mess with this. You'll still be monitoring your watch, and you will have to move with a sense of urgency. You can advance time, which is a little different than the original game, but a welcome addition. There's been a few tweaks here and there from the original game, but for the most part, it is relatively unaltered. One thing that they did alter was the NPC AI. The survivors are not dumb as rocks. They're just dumb now. They still do get stuck on things, and they will sometimes fight zombies for no good reason, but I did not think they were anywhere near as stupid as that original game. I didn't have like serious issues with them like I did in the original. This, along with the game feeling a lot better and being way less clunky, in addition to autosaves, the game is far less punishing, and it's actually a bit of an easier experience, but it's not like so easy that I would say that it's watered down or streamlined. These were improvements that I think were very well warranted. Look, I love how the original game was janky and clunky and very punishing at times, but I've also been playing the game for like 15 years at this point. I can't imagine trying Dead Rising 1 for the very first time in current year. I'd probably be like, wow, this is clunky as hell. How did people even like this? This deluxe remaster, I really don't think you're going to be feeling that. They updated the UI a little bit, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, this is like the best UI that Dead Rising's ever had. And really, this is just kind of the best gameplay Dead Rising has ever had. It's never been so smooth, so refined, but it still retains what made Dead Rising so awesome. The atmosphere, the mall, the characters, the jank, the difficulty, the time limit, it's all here. All the best parts of Dead Rising with all the modern day tweaks and quality of life improvements that you'd really want. I will say though, while I think this is by and large the definitive way to play the original Dead Rising and is probably the best Dead Rising experience you could get, it doesn't outright replace the original. It doesn't make the original Dead Rising obsolete. There were a number of little changes with this remake, remaster, and some of them are just strange. They got rid of the erotica genre, they changed one of the characters slightly, and at times the script has been changed. It's nothing game changing, it's nothing major, and I know some people were blowing it up and acting like it was was this massive change, but it still is worth noting. The gameplay and graphical improvements more than make up for this, and I just had an absolute blast playing through this game. I almost played through the entire game in one sitting because I really was just having so much fun. I love this franchise to death, and I love this game. I'm so glad that Dead Rising is back, and I can't wait to see what's next for the series. But in the meantime, oh yeah, 100% recommend this one. So here we got Resident Evil 8 Village, which initially released in 2021. Now, Resident Evil 7 obviously reinvented the wheel for the Resident Evil series. It really took the entire franchise into a different direction, and so I was really eager to see what they were going to do with RE8. And you know what? It did not disappoint. They took the series in a number of directions that I did not expect. So the game takes place after RE7, and it sees Ethan and Mia just having a peaceful life with their baby when all of a sudden boulder punching Chris Redfield rolls up and kidnaps the baby. And naturally Ethan goes after him because what the fuck. And Chris responds to this by dropping Ethan off in this weird secluded village where all of a sudden he gets swarmed by lichens. But this game's got way more to it than just some werewolves. There's Lady D and plenty of other monsters that show up. The story, I think it's actually pretty good here. I think the initial premise is pretty solid. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue. You really want to find out why Chris did what he did and who exactly are these monsters running this village. And I really think that the strongest element of RE8's story is actually the villains. These are some of the most memorable, iconic villains of the entire Resident Evil franchise. And I'm not just talking about Lady D. All of them are good in this game. But our giant Dami Mommy is the best, and the fan favorite for a reason. But in all seriousness, I actually really like the story, world, villains, and characters of RE8. I think it's really strong. When it comes to the gameplay, it plays pretty similar to Resident Evil 7. It is first-person survival horror at its absolute finest, and the game has surprisingly a lot of comparisons to Resident Evil 4. It sees you dropped into this village initially, but will see you going to a number of different environments where you can freely explore and try to figure out where you're supposed to go next. The game is nowhere near as linear as, say, the Resident Evil 3 remake, but these aren't big open worlds or anything like that. There's just a little bit of non-linearity here, and there's actually a fair amount of exploration. And oftentimes the game will reward you for exploring with little goodies and resources. Like the other Resident Evil titles, you will have to manage several resources, your health, ammo, etc. But I will say that this game isn't particularly stingy. Of course, along the way you're going to be greeted by numerous monsters that want to rip Ethan's face off, and you're going to have to take them out. When it comes to the gunplay in this game, I think it's pretty decent to good. It doesn't absolutely blow me away or make me feel things that I've never felt before, but a lot of the guns feel satisfying, the enemies react accordingly, and I think that it's pretty good overall. And there's actually a good enemy roster here as well, and there's plenty of epic boss fights. I do want to give a major shout out to the boss fights of RE8. It might be the best part of the entire game. That or the general level design, I actually think these areas are very well developed, and again, they really incentivize exploration and going off the beaten path, but there's also plenty of scares in these areas as well. This is a scary game. It doesn't absolutely leave me scared to pieces every single time I play it. I'm not leaving this game with brown pants every single time, but I genuinely would say that this is one of the scariest games in the entire franchise. And all of this really kept me on the edge of my seat, and I absolutely wanted to see what was going to happen next. And one of the reasons for that is the game's excellent pacing. It is always keeping things interesting, like every hour you're doing something different, and yeah, some areas are clearly better than others. I think the game honestly peaks in the first half, but the game does a really good job at keeping things varied, and I think the length is like perfect. It's not too short, but it's not too long either. It's that nice sweet spot where it goes on for a good while, but it's also still incredibly replayable and it doesn't drag on. And something else that makes the game incredibly replayable, a la Resident Evil 4, is all the secrets, treasure, and spending it all at the shop and getting some really powerful weapons. I've come to realize that it really doesn't matter what RE game it is, finding secrets and buying shit at the shop is always going to be a good time, and yeah, it's pretty great here. Now, in terms of negatives or complaints I have with RE8, I do have a few. The last part of the game is just not great. I didn't love the story at this part. I thought it was relatively predictable, and then there's a sequence where you play as somebody that is not Ethan, I won't spoil who. And this, man, I hated this part. It feels so out of place. I wasn't having a good time with it, and I was like, can this part just end? And it feels like it goes on forever. And then the game's ending, I was just kinda about it. And then there was even a DLC follow-up that was supposed to clear things up or add even more, but it didn't really feel like it added all that much, and it was just kind of a waste of time. To the point where I wouldn't even recommend playing the DLC unless you got an edition of the game that already came with it. but what I'm trying to say is the first half of RE8 is certainly better than the second half. I can't say that just the intro is peak because there actually is the baby house, which is one of the most memorable sequences of any Resident Evil title, but outside of that, yeah, the intro really is the peak. That's the best part, that's when it's the scariest, and that's when I thought it was the best. Shocker, going up against Lady D, Mommy Dami is low-key the best part of the game. Who would have guessed that? Not me. Totally not me whatsoever. Couldn't be me, absolutely not. You're thinking of somebody else, you're thinking of some other spicy nugget fiend, not totally Tubular Jonathan. Anyway, let's move on. When it comes to the game's presentation, it is absolutely fantastic. This is an incredible looking game. The environments are stunning. The character models are some of the best you'll find in any video game. The game actually ran super well. Nothing but high marks here. I think the sound is pretty great. The save theme, while not an absolute banger, is still pretty good. And so let's take this home. Resident Evil 8 Village, I think it's a pretty solid game. If you like Resident Evil, if you like horror games and you haven't tried it for some reason, this is one you absolutely should try. It's got plenty of good things to it, and I have no problem recommending it. While it's not my favorite of the modern Resident Evil titles, I still think it's really good, and it provides something different for the series that it has truly not seen before. And so here we have Monster Hunter Wilds, the latest mainline Monster Hunter title, and the real follow-up to Monster Hunter World. Wilds really feels like the next step for this series. It feels like this series is again going to be ushering in a new generation thanks to Wilds. Well, let's start with the story. This game actually attempts to have like a full-blown story way more than any other Monster Hunter game. It actually has real named characters, an actual plot line, some memorable moments and set pieces. This is a full-blown campaign out here, more so than any other Monster Hunter game before it, and the shocking thing is, the story's actually pretty decent in this game. There's a lot of world building, and it sees your completely customizable hunter along with a group of explorers going to check out this new uncharted region known as the Forbidden Lands, where it's a lawless wasteland that has been isolated for thousands of years. And yeah, it's up to y'all to figure out what the hell's going on here. And I'll just say some real shit actually does go down in this game. I enjoy the story. I like these characters. I like that the handler actually has a name, Alma. She's good. There's plenty of good characters in this game. There's actually a few moments where I was like, damn, something's actually happening here. It's not just leading to the next hunt. They managed to make me kind of care about the world and story of a Monster Hunter game, which I feel like no other Monster Hunter game outside of the stories games themselves have been able to do, so I'm gonna give them some flowers there for making something that's actually alright. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, in some areas, it's more of the same, but there's plenty of areas where Rise actually flips things on its head, and it actually does change a number of staples in the Monster Hunter series. The biggest change, by far, is that everything is connected. Everything is seamless. In every other Monster Hunter game before this, the village or like hub area was always separated from the hunting grounds. You'd chill in the hub or camp or wherever, and then you would go off to the hunts, and that would be a totally separate location. Here, everything is connected. All of the areas are connected, all of the camps, hubs, everything is connected. When you go out on a hunt, instead of, a loading screen and then you're somewhere completely unrelated to where you were before, here, you just walk out the front door basically, and then you go off on the hunt. Like Rise, you don't actually have to hunt down the monsters, it tells you where they are, and you can even press a button that will automatically take you there. The Palamutes don't return, but mounts do, thanks to this new creature known as the Secret. And no, it's not the Palamutes, they don't go stupid fast, but they're still very useful. The gameplay is easily the most streamlined Monster Hunter's gameplay has ever been. Crafting is easier than ever before. There's more accessibility and tutorials than ever before, and it feels like anybody can get into this game. I know some people at this point don't care for how streamlined this series has become, but I'm honestly totally okay with it. I think the streamlining is all done in favor of getting you to these big spectacle fights as fast as possible. No longer are you stuck looking for resources for hours on end. Crafting new weapons, armor, and equipment doesn't take an eternity. You don't have to grind like crazy like you may have in the older games, and it feels like truly anybody can get into this gameplay loop, and I think that's only a good thing. But hey, if you don't like how streamlined and focused this game has become, you can always go back to the old games. There's plenty of content in those older games. But anyway, back to Wild. So all of this streamlining and making the entire game a big open world is cool and all, but if the combat isn't good, does it really matter? Well, thankfully the combat is good. The combat is arguably the best combat of the entire series. It feels really good, and it's always satisfying. There are 14 weapons, they're all wildly different from each other. Each one has a good amount of depth, and It's just really fun to try out a bunch of them. In the previous games I kind of jumped around with a few different weapons, but in Wilds I really wanted to finally try out the greatsword for real, and it's been a whole lot of fun to use, and it's cool to see just how different all of these weapons play from the ranged to the melee. There are well over a dozen different playstyles. The actual monsters themselves are probably the smartest monsters of the entire series. Not only do they have plenty of different attacks, but they actually have a lot of strategies, more than simply just running away when they get hurt. It also depends on what time of day it is and even the weather conditions. Certain weather conditions can really favor certain monsters and make other ones want to run away. Other monsters very well might show up as well, and this of course happened in all of the other Monster Hunter games, but here they have like this more interesting prey-predator dynamic where certain monsters are gonna run from other monsters, and of course vice versa. I also feel like this game has more tools than ever before. There are just tons of different ways to stop these monsters and of course take them out. I think right now there's a decent roster as far as the monsters come. You gotta remember, we're still in the launch days. When Monster Hunter World launched, it didn't have a ton of monsters. Rise, it had more, but it didn't have an absolute shit ton of monsters like both of those games do now, so I'm sure over the next few years, the roster will grow immensely. As for the launch roster of monsters, I think it's good. The best launch roster for monsters? You be the judge of that one, but I don't really have any issues with this. And of course, as you defeat these monsters, you'll be able to upgrade your weapons and equipment, and that's always going to be a really great gameplay loop. And man, the armor just looks so fucking cool in this game. It looked cool in the other games, but I don't know, something about Wilds, they just really went hard with these outfits. So when it comes to pacing and progression, it's actually very similar to World. Despite it being, you know, a big open world you can freely explore, you'll still get plenty of story missions, and those story missions are actually the lower hunter ranks. Unfortunately, for some reason, they decided to take a step back from Rise and made the progression like World, so if you're playing with a bunch of people who just started the game with you, you'll be in single player for the most part unless someone has finished that mission already, because you gotta watch the cutscenes. Like, I really don't understand why they brought this back. In Rise, it was perfect. Everybody could just play together and it would just play the cutscenes regardless. But here, yep, we're back to single player. At the very least, I will say the single player is a lot more compelling in this game than Worlds ever was, and I didn't really have that big of an issue with it, especially because it was on the shorter side and there's actually plenty of other side hunts to do while you're doing the main story. In World, it felt like you were just kind of focused on the story mode for the first 10 hours. In Wilds, I feel like the first 10 hours, half of it was maybe the story mode and the other half was side content. I was doing all of the other hunts, and you can do really every other hunt with your buddies, and once you're done with the main story, once the credits roll, yeah, you're fine. You'll have plenty of content to play with your friends, but it is worth noting that it is like World in the first 5 to 10 hours. Maybe longer if you take a while to finish that main story. Something though that is a huge improvement on any other Monster Hunter game is how joining other people's hunts work. It's actually incredibly smooth and I really like it. Like, this is a great system where basically you can make a custom lobby, your party can join in, and then anybody can join anyone's hunts at any time outside of the cutscene bullshit. Like, you can join a mission from anywhere in the world and it'll just immediately teleport you to where the monster is, and then you can get to work. I really enjoy this. It's incredibly seamless and it's the fastest multiplayer that the series has ever seen. This is an excellent addition, and playing with your friends is better than ever. Outside of that fucking story mode bullshit, man, that just it annoys me. Why did they put that in? They have all these great innovations and new ideas, and then you can't even do the story missions with other people unless they've already done them. Anyway, outside of that, I think the gameplay overall is probably the strongest of the entire series. I actually really do like these big open interconnected worlds. I like hunting the monsters down. I think the combat is the best it's ever been. It certainly feels the best, and I found the fights in this game to be the most exhilarating, exciting, and engaging fights that I've really ever had from this series. Whether I was by myself or other people were joining me, it was always a great time. I was just having an absolute blast with this one. Graphically, this is easily the best game in the entire franchise. While I know there are very clearly some optimization issues with it, everything's been pretty steady for me personally, and I think the game is wildly impressive when it comes to the presentation. The character models look great, the environments are very detailed and lush. This feels like a lived-in world, and Oh, it is so great. I just really enjoy the open world on a number of different levels, and I very much enjoy just how interconnected everything is. Frame rate was certainly a bit shaky, but I will say being in private lobbies seems to improve my performance. That's just for me personally what I've noticed, but maybe others will have similar luck as well. I've put a fair amount of time into Monster Hunter Wilds, and I think the game absolutely has the potential to be the very best of the entire series, but for now I'm gonna have to give the edge to Monster Hunter Rise. It just has so much content. It's got so much going for it, and it actually runs pretty well. But Wilds, oh, this could easily be the very best of the entire series. I'm sure some people might not like that, but I do think that this game is a whole lot of fun. As things stand, I have no problem recommending this game to anybody that's ever liked Monster Hunter, action RPGs, or you've ever wanted to get into this series. This is absolutely the game to do it. And so here we have Monster Hunter Rise, initially releasing in 2021 for the Switch. I got this on the Switch when it came out, and that's the version I've put the most amount of time into. But eventually it was released on all other modern platforms. So this game really is the follow-up to World, not only bringing all of the upgrades and improvements from World, but it also brings a whole host of new features as well to create, in my opinion, what is a better game than World. And I'm sure plenty of people are going to disagree with me, but hey, we can all agree that both games are pretty awesome. So like World, this game features a full story mode. It sees your character that is completely customizable getting promoted to Hunter, and it's really about them starting their Monster Hunter journey. But 50 years ago, there was this mysterious calamity that occurred known as the Rampage, where a bunch of large monsters, like hordes of monsters, attacked and really just annihilated this entire village in a frenzied state. And there's signs that this is going to happen again, and so it'll be up to your hunter and really everybody else to prevent this from happening. The story is a little more interesting than World's. I thought the world building was pretty decent. The world building was alright in World, but it was more interesting here, and I like the whole calamity that is the Rampage. I like that they're building up to something. It was okay. I'm not going to act like it was award-winning stuff or anything like that, but you know what? It gets the job done. It was acceptable. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, on paper, it's not different from any other Monster Hunter game. You accept a hunt, you're tasked with slaying or capturing these large monsters using a variety of tools and weapons at your disposal. Then, once you defeat them, you'll gain new crafting materials, so then you can craft new weapons and equipment, get stronger and stronger, rinse and repeat. However, there are a number of changes to Rise from even World. All those nice quality of life improvements from World, though, are absolutely here. Crafting is a lot faster. There's no zones, everything is one big seamless open world, and the gameplay is just a lot faster. They actually got rid of the hunting aspect of Monster Hunter as well. Instead of looking through all of the environment for the monster, it just tells you where it's at immediately. And I know some people didn't really care for this, but I won't lie, I didn't really mind. It always kind of felt like we were going towards this direction, and so I'm glad that they finally embraced it. Hunts in general, though, are just a lot faster in this game. You know why they're a lot faster? This game introduces palamutes, mounts that you can actually ride during the duration of the hunt, and these go way faster than your hunter's ever going to go. And it doesn't use any stamina whatsoever. They can also climb things incredibly quickly. I like the palamutes. I think they're a great addition, and they allow you to get to the monster fights even faster. Something that's really different about Rise from any other Monster Hunter game, though, is how vertical it is. Not only are the palamutes able to climb everything, but they also give you a tool known as the wire bug, and this allows you to basically grapple all over the place, and you'll be climbing a lot. This game has a lot of peaks and valleys, and is easily the most vertical Monster Hunter game of them all, but I actually really like the wire bug. It offers a lot of new, unique traversal that had never before been seen in the series. The wire bug even allows you to mount certain creatures, which I think is pretty cool. And if that wasn't enough, the wire bug actually adds extra attacks and combos to each of the weapons, further adding to not only the depth of the combat, but just how useful the wire bug is in general. While I know grappling and swinging all over the place with the wire bug isn't everyone's cup of tea, I absolutely ate this shit up. I was really enjoying it and found it to just be very entertaining. It really added to the hunts in several different aspects, and I think it's one of the greatest additions to the Monster Hunter series in general. Outside of the traversal and searching for the monsters, we also have the combat. The combat feels just as good as it did in World. Like, the weapons feel virtually identical to how they did in World. There's still 14 of them, they all play pretty differently from each other, and they all have arguably as much depth as they did before. They're also incredibly satisfying to use. All of the weapons feel weighted, heavy, and it'll always be incredibly satisfying to pull off just these giant attacks where the monster falls back and everything. Like, the feedback is really good in Rise. When it comes to the monsters themselves, I think there's a pretty good roster here. There's plenty of new ones thrown in here, and like World, they're actually very dynamic when it comes to the AI and reacting. And I would argue that the combat is not only as good as World's, but arguably better thanks to the wire bugs. I very much enjoy the loops of Rise. Not only does it feel like the best aspects of World, but they just introduce even more to it. It's easily the fastest Monster Hunter, and it feels even more streamlined than World did, and I mean that in a good thing. The pacing is excellent, and they actually addressed an issue from World where, right from the get-go, everybody can play together. Nobody has to watch a certain cutscene and then join through some unintuitive manner. No, everybody can just play all of the missions together, which is how it should be. So thank you. I had a lot more fun in the lower ranks because I was actually with my friends. Like most Monster Hunter games, there's a lot of content to this game. Throughout the years, there's been plenty of updates. There was a massive DLC Sunbreak, and just like World, you could easily spend hundreds of hours playing this game. There's just so much content to it. There's so many things to do, so many monsters to hunt, and that's without the DLC. With the DLC, there really is just a lot going on here. But the new features don't actually end there. They introduced a new gameplay style known as Rampage, where it's actually a tower defense mode where you have to defend your base against several large monsters attacking all at once. This I was kind of up and down about. At first, I was a bit optimistic about it. I was like, oh, you know, a tower defense mode could be interesting. It could add some variety. It could be fun. But after doing it several times, I found myself to just kind of dislike it. And not just because it feels kind of out of place for Monster Hunter, but I just didn't really find it all that fun. Sure, there is certainly a bit of spectacle to seeing all these monsters show up and defeating them all, but I just didn't find it all that engaging. Maybe that's just a me thing, but every single time I played Rampage, I was like, gosh, I just wish I was playing the main game. I wish I was just playing normal Monster Hunter. I don't really want to play this, and I think that's a feeling a lot of people share. But that is easily my biggest negative with the entire game. Thankfully, there's not a bunch of rampages. It's not like a third of the game. No, there really isn't that many rampages. I'd say not even 10% of my game time was the rampage mode. A majority of my gameplay was this really compelling, addictive loop that Monster Hunter really has just perfected at this point. And with Rise, they somehow made it even more fun. Like, this game was just a total blast. Whether I was by myself or with my friends, I was always having a good time with Rise. I know a lot of people don't care for how this game looks. It looks nowhere near as good as World, but you gotta remember, it was made for the Nintendo Switch, and as a Nintendo Switch game, I think it looks excellent, and this art style totally works with the series. Yes, it does run on the RE engine now, and some people have certain expectations of the games on that engine looking incredible, but I still think Rise does look good, even if it's not as graphically impressive as the prior game. So overall, Monster Hunter Rise is a fantastic game in my opinion. Not only is it one of the very best Monster Hunter games of them all, but they actually managed to improve on World. I really like almost all of the improvements, and I think the gameplay is better. Sure, it doesn't look as nice as World, but graphics aren't everything, and all in all, I just had more fun with Rise. I have absolutely no problem recommending it, even nowadays, and it's easily one of the best action RPGs of the 2020s. So here we got Street Fighter 6, which initially released in 2023, and here we are a few years later, and I can confidently tell you Street Fighter 6 is not only a fantastic game, but the best fighting game of the 2020s. Like, this game is just absolutely fantastic on so many levels. The game had an incredibly impressive initial release, the most impressive legit of any Street Fighter game to date, and a few years later, yeah, shit's just been getting better and better. It feels like they just got everything absolutely right, like on the first try too, with a really robust, in-depth story mode that actually has a lot of length to it, with an awesome online hub and battle system, and then it has all the staples that single player Street Fighter games would have, you know, like the arcade, the practice, the training, the challenges, all of that. Like, and the fighting mechanics are not only really user friendly, probably the most user friendly of any Street Fighter game, but it seems like there's still a ton of depth here that, you know, I mean, I don't know if I'd say it rivals Third Strike, but it's certainly up there. It's definitely more in depth than 5 and 4. Now, I think the best place to start when talking about Street Fighter is the fighting. The fighting is just fantastic in this game. Not only does it feel incredible and it feels amazing, it's really smooth, it's satisfying, and it's just great to control. One of the best controlling fighting games I've ever seen. And with the controls, they actually have two control schemes here. You know, you've got your classic Street Fighter controls where it's the 6-button layout, but they actually have a simplified 4-button version that's called Modern Controls. And you know, at first I was a bit like, is this like the easy mode of from Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite? But no, this is actually legit. This is actually a legit way to play, and it doesn't cripple you. It doesn't make you stupid OP. You're not going to get owned by somebody who's on classic controls. I mean, that might happen anyway, but I think Modern is actually a very viable option here, and it's great for people who haven't played a ton of Street Fighter or aren't super familiar with fighting games. In fact, this is like the most inviting fighting game I've ever played, where it's like, you got no skill here, try this game because it will make you a fan, and I love that. I want as many people to play these fighting games as possible, and this game is just incredibly inviting to the genre. And then there's actually some depth. This game does have some mechanics to it that harken back to Third Strike, like the introduction of the drive gauge. You know, you've got your super down below, but this is unrelated actually. The drive gauge can basically be seen as your stamina. So when you do a parry, which yes, parries actually return here, it uses the drive gauge. There's also what is basically a focus attack. It uses the drive gauge. If you use all of it up, then you actually take chip damage while blocking, and you can't use any of these moves. And I think the drive gauge is a great addition. It's a good gimmick for Street Fighter. It doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel like it's taking over. It doesn't feel weird like the V stuff. And it just adds so much depth to this game. At least it feels like it. We'll see in the long run if it actually does, but I am a huge fan of these systems. I think they're both great, and they're both great mechanics to have here, and it really adds a new layer to Street Fighter that we haven't seen yet. And then we have the characters. I think the character roster, you know, it's actually pretty solid. It's certainly better than 5s. In fact, just about everything's better than 5s. I think the roster's good. There's a lot of the classics here. There's a couple new ones here, and I like everybody. Everybody plays super different, and I was actually able to pick up a bunch of characters I've never been good at before and use them with the modern control scheme and actually whoop some ass. Characters like Jury. And I gotta say, I felt pretty cool while doing it. But aside from that, I really do like the character roster, and I'm gonna just say the aesthetic, the presentation, the music in this game. Oh, it is so good. I love how this game looks. I love how it sounds. Love the aesthetic. Like, it's just fantastic from a presentation standpoint. And then the game actually has a character creator. You get to make your own character. You can make a monstrosity. As you can see, I made a monstrosity. It was just horrifying to look at. But for some reason, I seem to be right at home with the other monstrosities here. Eventually, I did change it because I felt physically ill looking at my character and made something that looks normal. And what do you do with this character? You actually have a whole ass story mode to play through. Finally, we get some real single player content to Street Fighter, more than an hour story mode or the arcade mode, which the arcade mode is here, and arcade mode is cool and all, and training's great, and the challenges are great, but we have a whole ass story mode here. There's like an actual story, which, you know, it's pretty Street Fighter. Tournaments, some classic characters, some conflict. I mean, it's nothing really special, the story is, but this game is so unhinged. Like, Street Fighter's always been pretty unhinged, but like seeing it in this fully fleshed single player mode, yeah, you really see how unhinged it is. And this single player mode is like Yakuza, where there's actually like a whole map to explore. There's like side objectives, there's like main missions, there's collectibles. You can customize your character, like I said. There's RPG mechanics where you level up your stats and your skills and learn new moves. You actually get to really customize your character's movesets as you learn new moves from characters like Chun-Li and Ryu, Ken. All of the classics are here. And you get into fights with random mooks on the street. The gameplay is much more like a beat 'em up like Final Fight here, and Final Fight is playable in the hub area, but yeah, it's a lot more like Final Fight where you just beat everything up rather than being a traditional fighting game, and it actually really works. I think the single player is actually great in this game. There's a bunch to explore, and it's got a really good length to it. It's got well over 10 to 15 hours of gameplay in the single player alone for a fighting game. That's the most of like any fighting game. Like maybe like Mortal Kombat Deception comes kind of close, but that game wasn't very good. This is actually good. Now, is the single player gameplay, you know, the story mode, the best gameplay ever? No. I won't lie, it does get pretty repetitive, especially by the end, and there's a ton of annoying ass enemies like the fridge and the drones. These can just fuck right off. I hated fighting these, but I mean, this gameplay, for the most part, is still excellent. It's a great time, and exploring the city was actually really cool, and I'm, like, shocked that they actually put this in the game. I had no idea this was, like, going to be in the game. Maybe I wasn't watching the marketing enough, but I was like, damn, there's a full-ass story mode here. This is cool. but I know there are plenty of people that probably won't even ever try it. And then we have the online and the battle hub. I really like the battle hub system where you can just kind of vibe with your friends in here and mess around with other Street Fighter games and just, again, hang out. It's cool. And then the online battles, they're great. I've never had any issues with the online battles that weren't of my own. Like my internet shitting out, thank you Xfinity, but like when it comes to this game's connectivity and stability, when it comes to the online, it's been nothing but fantastic, and I've already had a ton of great matches and a ton of fun with Street Fighter 6, and I expect to have a ton of fun with this game for years. Like, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but this game is just superb, and I have zero problem recommending this game to anybody who likes fighting games, Street Fighter. It's just excellent. And here we have it, the Resident Evil 4 remake, releasing in 2023. I believe this to be not only the best of the entire Resident Evil series, but arguably the best game Capcom has ever made. Like, this game is just unbelievably good. I love the original Resident Evil 4 to pieces. It's one of my favorite games of all time, so when I saw that they were remaking it, I was a bit skeptical, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, the original is still fantastic, it's timeless, do they really need to remake it? But after playing through the remake and letting some time sit with it, oh yeah, it's not even close. This is just delightful. No exaggeration, this is truly one of the greatest video games ever made. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but I absolutely love the shit out of this game. They absolutely understood the assignment and somehow made the original game even better. They brought it to a modern era, they updated the controls, added a few new areas, tweaked some things here and there, and what you have is a certified masterpiece. When it comes to this game's story, setting, characters, etc., it's pretty much the same as the original. It sees Leon going to Spain to go rescue the president's daughter, and a whole lot of shit goes down, even more than the original. Something you'll immediately notice about the remake is that it takes itself a lot more serious than the original game. The original game had plenty of serious moments, but it also had some goofy moments too. This game, yeah, it's serious pretty much the entire time, and you know, that's okay with me. I'm fine with the game taking itself a lot more serious if it actually does a good job at taking itself seriously, and you know what? It does a pretty good job. And thanks to that, this game actually has a really tense, oppressive atmosphere that the original could never even try to achieve. But you know what? I actually dig this. I think it's really great, and it further helps this game stand apart from the original. I also think the storytelling, the writing, and the voice acting is quite a bit better than the original. I mean, the writing's just been touched up, the storytelling's been improved, and the voice acting, yeah, it's quite a bit better. And again, it really adds to this game's overall tense atmosphere, and I just really enjoy it. And really, I got nothing but the highest marks when it comes to this game's plot, story, characters, writing, world building, etc. It's just so well done, and it feels like no other Resident Evil game has been able to touch what this game has. They've tried, certainly several times now, but none of them have been able to hit like the original until this remake, and it arguably hits even better. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, it really is just an improved Resident Evil 4. The original Resident Evil 4 was already a beast of a game, but this remake goes even further. First off, the controls and feel of the game has been massively improved from the original. The original could be tight, stiff, and a bit clunky at times. This game gets rid of all of that. It just feels really nice, it's really smooth, and you can actually move and shoot, which you couldn't do in the original, and it just feels fantastic. It's easily the best controlling Resident Evil game to date. It also has the best gunplay of any Resident Evil. The guns feel incredible in this game. They all have a really great impact. The way the enemies react is just some of the best you'll find in any video game. Like, the guns feel really nice, and that's just one element to the combat as well. Obviously, Leon has a number of different firearms, all of which feel different, but he has grenades, and then he has a bunch of physical moves as well. He can really kick some ass in this game. Like, he was an absolute badass in the original, but now he's kicking even more ass. He's doing Germans, roundhouse kicks, he's just throwing people left and right, and you know what? It feels even better, even more raw and visceral in the remake than it did in the original. The melee attacks are excellent. Something that was kind of useful in the original but not really was the knife, and that's been just completely repurposed here, and it's actually a parry now. Yeah, Leon has a parry, and you know what? This is one of the best parries of any video game. You can parry just about everything in this game, and it feels absolutely incredible. No other game has gotten a parry to feel like this, and you can do some absolutely ridiculous shit with the parry, like blocking the chainsaw attack, but it will drain the knife's durability. Yeah, you actually have to worry about knife durability here. You can be knifeless and shit out of luck, and trust me, it's no fun. You really want to use the knife here. And all of this really leads to the combat just being this massive sandbox that you can play in. There's so many different ways to approach every single encounter, and these encounters are all meticulously laid out, and it just feels like you have so many different options. You had a lot of options in the original, but now you have even more options. And what's great is they all feel great, and they're all very viable options. There are plenty of times where you can actually be kind of stealthy and get away with it as well. Or you can just run in guns blazing, you want to shoot everything with the red 9, go ahead. The gun still feels absolutely amazing. There's even a few new guns here, and they're excellent as well. I feel like I could just pop off forever about Resident Evil 4 Remake's combat. It just never got old. It is so much fun. It's up there with like Doom Eternal as some of the best combat you'll find of any modern video game. It looks, it plays, and it feels exceptional. Popping off headshots never felt so good. Doing those big roundhouse kicks, they never felt this good. And the game is also more challenging than the original ever was. I died way more times in this version than the OG, and you know what? I actually like how tense everything gets. This game can feel pretty relentless at times. The game recommends you play on hardened, especially if you played the original, and that's what I played on, and yeah, this shit was tight. And it further adds to that oppressive atmosphere I was talking about earlier. This game just gets absolutely relentless at times. Like, it feels like there's no breathing room whatsoever, but you know what? That's all good. I really like how it just keeps going and going. The game gets more and more challenging. There's so many amazing encounters here. The bosses show up. They're better than ever. There's some new bosses here, and you know what? I really like everything this game is doing when it comes to the encounters, the combat, the difficulty, and overall progression. Like the original game, you go to a number of different areas that are all wildly different from each other. In this game, it just has some of the best progression of any video game ever. The pacing is really tight, it's constantly mixing things up, there's something new every hour, like, it's just got so much variety to it, and from start to finish, it is all killer, no filler here, which is pretty impressive since the game is pretty long. It's around the same length as the original, and it still is one of the longer RE titles overall. And legit, it's just so engaging throughout. It's one of those games that'll make me sit up in my seat pretty much the entire time. I'll go full gamer mode, full goblin mode, whatever you want to call that shit, 3 AM Jack in the Box tweaker mode. I'm fiending for more Resident Evil 4 Remake. It's just one of those incredible, unforgettable experiences that you wish you could replay for the first time. There's so many good set pieces, so many incredible moments, so many unforgettable areas, and the remake really only made everything better. They even added some new stuff here and there. There's some new areas, not a lot, just a few new areas that add a bit more to the game and the narrative. There's now side objectives. Yeah, the trader, the merchant, who's awesome by the way, he'll actually give you side objectives to complete, and these actually don't feel shoehorned in either. They're actually fun to go complete, and you gotta go look for the medallions. You know what? I got nothing but good things to say about the side content they added here. I think it's actually pretty sweet. And you know what else is pretty sweet? The inventory. Inventory management was already great in the original. Here, it's just as good, and you can even do the auto sort if you don't like it. It really is the best of both worlds. Something that is worth bringing up is that the game does actually have like all the puzzles from the original game. That stupid fucking color puzzle returns. I hate that one. It can go to hell, fuck off and die, go eat stupid TGI Fridays. Stop being unfriendly to us colorblind folk. Anyway, outside of that, the puzzles are fine. They're pretty straightforward and can be solved relatively easily. I know that some people have complained about some of the stuff cut out from the original game, but honestly, I think this was done for the better. Yeah, there are a few things that are missing, an area or two, a boss fight or two, but I really don't think anything of value was really lost, and what we get instead is much better in my opinion. The fight with Krauser, yeah, this shit was way more hype than some stupid QuickTime events. I think all of this really helps tighten the pacing up. When it comes to this game's presentation, I mean, just look at it. The game looks absolutely incredible. It's phenomenal really by every metric: lighting, environments, characters, frame rate, stability, etc. It's pretty great stuff here. The music is also really great. There's some excellent remixes. I like everything this game is doing. It's pretty hard to find any complaints with the Resident Evil 4 remake. There's Mercenaries mode, which is pretty fun. For some reason there's a bunch of stupid microtransactions, but genuinely you can safely ignore those and have a ton of fun with it. There's also the DLC separate ways, which unfortunately you gotta pay for now, but hey, it's still pretty good. And and at this point I'm convinced that Resident Evil 4 will just kind of always be the GOAT of not only RE, but Capcom in general. This game really is the peak of video games. It's up there in that top tier echelon where I think everybody that breathes air should try this game, not even close. The 11 out of 10. It's the must-play title that got me jumping out of my seat. I'm so excited to play it again. Honestly, I should really go back to this game. It is just so unbelievably good, and you know, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go back to the game. I feel like I could play through this game a dozen times and still be loving it. It's just that good. Resident Evil 4 Remake, well, it's so good. But anyway, that's it for today's video. I popped off for quite a bit for Capcom. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you made it to this part of the video, you can tell me Crapcom. You say that word and you'll get a heart from me, and hopefully not a bunch of hate comments or bricks being thrown through your window. Anyway, that's it. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye now.